Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk a little bit about something that is on my mind for quite a while now. Um, and I can tell you so much. If you're around in the sim racing scene, you may have recognized, especially with the pandemic showing up, that in the last couple of years we have more and more real racers turning to the sim racing scene. And with that, we also get their impressions on how does the sim actually feel in real life. And that is obviously good to some extent, but if we take a close look, we always see that, especially if it comes down to iRacing and how iRacing handles brake physics, they always seem to struggle and say, well, it's not realistic that you don't have to press like 100% of the brake pressure that is there, and that you only need to use 80% of the brakes, or 70 or 95 or 90, whatever, to actually make the car stop. And they always complain about that. And today we're going to go through this, and I'm going to show you why they actually are wrong with that. So the big question is, why does the driver feel different in real life over to the sim? Especially if it comes down to iRacing. And to actually get there, we need to get some rough physical understanding on the topic. We need to understand that the complete braking system is a closed fluid system. So that means as soon as you put a force onto the pedal, fluid is transferred over the caliper and the piston to the pads. And if the pads hit the brake disc, then force applies. And actually, that very moment is where we start recognizing pressure on our foot itself. Like, there's a resistance that we do feel as soon as we get to the point where the pads hit the disc. And this pressure that we do feel at this point will arise until we cannot press the fluid any longer. And that would be 100% brake pressure. So, and at this very moment comes where the problem lies. Because 100% brake pressure that you can obviously apply if you are strong enough and could press the pedal hard enough, doesn't tell you anything on how much force is transferred between the tire and the track surface. So if we really want to get that down to the wire, we would have to go way too much into the physics for this video. We would need to talk about friction circles and friction coefficients and stuff like that, but I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible for you now. That means at the end of the day, there is something called the friction circle, which I'm not going to explain further at this point, but that actually defines how much force can be transferred from each tire to the surface. The tires themselves can transfer a lot of forces, that is acceleration, deceleration, and steering forces. And if the combination of the three, well, actually of the two, because you either accelerate or you decelerate, you don't do both at the same time, at least most of the time not, is greater than the normal force times the friction coefficient between tire and surface, then what we will receive is a locking up tire. So having explained that, we know that the brake forces that are applied are in relation to the friction coefficient that is there. And we now know that there's a friction coefficient between the tire and the track surface, but also there's a friction coefficient between pads and disc, like where the actual force is going to be applied. And that actually results in the effect that we would need way less brake pressure in the system if we, for example, take medium pads and change them to the high pads. So more force is going to be transferred between the pads and the brake disc, so the force is greater, but we are limited to the friction circle, and therefore we don't need as much pedal travel on our sim, because the actual bite point is way earlier, simulated. And now we do actually understand where the problem lies, because we are limited to our hardware. Like, if we press our pedal, we have the same feeling over and over again. We do have bump rubbers most of the time, at least most of us do use it. Most of us don't use hydraulic pedals, and we press the pedals and we will always at the same time have the point where we feel the bite. But the simulation tells us we have the bite point earlier because we are now using high brake pads. So the maximum force is way earlier, and for this we don't feel it on our hardware. And that is actually the problem, because we think, well, I have to only put like 20% of my travel onto the pedal, and I actually don't feel any feedback from my pedal. It's just in an area where I don't get any feedback from it, and that is a problem. So it's not that iRacing simulates it wrong, because actually it does it right. It's that we are limited to the hardware we use. Actually, if you would want to make each and every car feel unique, and even if we take the same car and just change the pad size, we would have to adapt our rubbers that we do use, or we would have to increase the amount of fluid pressure that is within our hydraulic pedals, but we don't do it. And that is why the sim feels weird if it comes down to braking over to real life. You know the deal. Give it a thumbs up, give it a subscription to the channel if you like what you see, and if you want to have more of this content, I will be going to do it. I just need your feedback, so help me out in what I should do